Hello, welcome everyone. This is Rick Taylor. I will be your webinar host, and this is a webinar presented by AvePoint. We are going to talk about the hybrid SharePoint. We have a couple of experts that I am actually very familiar with and very excited to present to you. And we're looking forward to spending this next hour with you to talk about hybrid. The agenda that we're going to cover today. First, I'll introduce who our speakers are, world-renowned SharePoint experts. We'll talk about the state of SharePoint and its research findings. We'll talk also about best practices, key service scenarios for hybrid, and then we'll kind of open it up for discussion. If you have some questions or other kinds of points that you would like to make, you can do those in the window, and we'll have our Q&A experts go ahead and answer those. All right, a little bit about who I am. Again, my name is Rick Taylor. I am a strategic advisor for the AvePoint Client Services, and I'll just let each of these speakers introduce themselves. We'll start with Bill Baer. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Rick, for the kind introduction. I'm Bill Baer. I'm a product manager here in Redmond, Washington in our SharePoint product group. Many of the technologies that I focus on, or the areas or aspects of SharePoint that I focus on a day-to-day basis, are our server product, which today is representative of our in-market offer, SharePoint Server 2016. I'm also responsible for our feature pack cadence. So feature pack 1 we released earlier this year and was inclusive of a number of different IT capabilities, to include some new hybrid capabilities, hybrid auditing and hybrid taxonomy respectively. I'm also responsible for feature pack 2, to which we just announced a few weeks ago at our virtual summit, which will be a developer-centric release focused on our ecosystem investments inclusive of the SharePoint framework. I also cover obviously our hybrid space, in addition to our migration offerings and our security, compliance, and manageability areas of the product. So that's a little bit about myself. I will go ahead and turn it over to Christian for introductions.
Hey, thanks, Bill. And yeah, so it's kind of fun too, because Bill, Rick, and I all used to be peers, you know, back in the day at Microsoft. So that's always fun. But hello, my name is Christian Buckley. I'm the founder and CEO of CollabTalk. CollabTalk does a couple different things, but it's a consulting and independent research company. And at the beginning of this year, and I'm sure everybody that's participating in this call was spammed repeatedly by one of the vendors with either to participate in the survey or to check out the results of the survey. But my team, in partnership with the Marriott School of Management at Brigham Young University, because I'm based in Salt Lake City, but we performed this study looking at the state of the hybrid SharePoint ecosystem globally, and there really hadn't been any data around it yet. But so I was excited to go through and put some definitive data around the research, and then it's afforded me the opportunity to spend more time with Bill and Rick and others to talk about, you know, the impact of this and the various solutions that we can offer out to customers. So excited to be here and once again talk about this, because I was hanging out in Bill's office just like a week ago or so, and he was excited to have me leave and stop talking about hybrid. So yeah. And then here you are again.
And here we are again, you know, and I didn't get that invite, so Bill, man, you're on my bad list now.
Yeah. It was a party, yeah, and you weren't invited, Rick, sorry.
Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll tell you what, Christian, I have had the opportunity of reading your report. Actually, I even got to participate. I was asked to participate, so I really enjoyed that. There were very insightful questions. And so actually what we'd like to do, so Christian, I'm going to turn the time a little bit over to you.
Yeah.
Yep. You know, kind of like a summary of what is the state of SharePoint and what were those research findings?
Sure, and it was, and I know that a lot of these kinds of studies can be, dry and boring, or they can be very broad and difficult to kind of identify. Well, what's the value here to me as a customer, as a solution provider, and working with my customers. But this is something what's different about this report, because there's a couple different initiatives that Microsoft has been working on. And maybe even Bill can talk to a couple of those points where there was an internal research that was done. There was an external Microsoft research effort that was done looking at broader cloud adoption, but which is typical. You get these cloud adoption, which kind of covers the various technologies, collaboration technologies, where this was focused entirely on SharePoint, and so it was unique in that way. And so just a little bit of a background of kind of what we were trying to go through. So, you have this process of as organizations are trying to figure out how do we move forward. They have years of on-premises infrastructure, all of the customizations, the third-party tools and things that they've built out, which is just typical that we see for organizations. If you spent more than 3-4 years using SharePoint, then you most likely use it as this Swiss Army knife solution where you went and kind of build it to meet your company needs. And it can be then difficult as you're transitioning and trying to move away from owning servers and infrastructure and having to manage all of that over to these consuming it as a service from the cloud. But we really didn't have any data as to how many customers were being impacted by various issues. I mean, I think Rick, Bill, there's no surprises out of the report, but it's about putting numbers behind it to see what truly is the impact of some of these issues that we hear about, talk to customers about on a constant basis.
Did you find that as a validation?
Well, we learned things, but there was a validation of a lot of that data. Sorry, Bill. I mean, your thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it absolutely validated some of what we already knew, and in most cases, one of the situations that you don't want to find yourself in is not knowing. And we had the luxury through several phases of research, as you mentioned, both internal and external, in addition to the research that you had mentioned, that have really validated where we are in respect to hybrid migration and cloud adoption today. So we were able to pull those three together and determine the commonalities that exist across those. And for many customers, the area that still remains a point of contention or a barrier to adoption of cloud services is a concern related to security and compliance. Predominantly. That could be governmental or regulatory compliance that the customer is required to adhere to. In many cases, from a security perspective, at the end of the day, the cloud is more secure than on-premises, and it's one of those things that's easy to say. But if you think about some of the capabilities that we have inside of Office 365, it's difficult to match those, particularly on-premises. So one of the things that we've invested in most recently is really, if you think about OneDrive for Business and you think about SharePoint and some of the recent investments, a lot of those have been centered on this concept of intelligence, really bringing machine learning into the equation to help people discover information and collaborate more efficiently, in addition to automation and other capabilities that intelligence affords across our collaborative suite. But at the same time, we've taken those same intelligence capabilities and we've infused those into security and compliance, and great examples of which are advanced data governance and threat intelligence via Office 365. So really at the end of the day, what the cloud does is it takes your firewall, which usually sat on a device or was a device itself within your data center, and transitions that to the user. The user becomes the new firewall for your organization. And that's where you have to really think about how you apply your security principles. And fortunately, via our cloud services, we've provided a number of different pivots via conditional access to address that exact scenario. So we can pivot across user, device, and location in order to help you address that new corporate firewall, which is the user. But, coming back to the original question, it definitely helped validate some of the concerns that customers have. For us, that's great news because we can continue to drive capabilities and features designed to meet, those needs.
Right.
So here's my question then. So
no, go ahead.
I have a question here. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm hearing what Christian is saying, and why, and everybody else is hearing what you're saying. So here's the question: why are they still hesitant?
Well, so let me. So as far as the report and going and doing this kind of study, knowing that there are people that have various concerns and trying to identify, well, how many people are saying, hey, security is an issue? Is it 5% of customers that are saying that? Is it 25%? Is it 85% of customers? Being informed and putting data around those things, one allows us to go and dig deeper into that and analyze that, ask additional questions to kind of pivot off of those types of responses, and to clarify that. Having again, back to the purpose of the report and us going through this activity is so that we can then go and have those kinds of conversations with customers so that we can better respond to where they, the number one response, you're going to see here in a minute with some of the other data points, number one response or concerns of why have you not, moved entirely into the cloud was, security. Well, what does that really mean? What does that, when you start digging into the specifics and requirements around that and try to understand that, so it's difficult to have those.
Did you seek to define that in your report?
We did go deeper within than just that top layer, hey, security, but because it wasn't just a survey. There were actually about 100 different independent interviews that were also done with a variety of people, customers, partners, Microsoft people, MVPs, Microsoft certified masters in the SharePoint arena. So we talked to Microsoft IT people, engineering, marketing. So we really got a variety of the backgrounds around this and explored some of these topics. So there is a little more depth around each of the different areas. I think provides better insights if you're a customer saying, hey, this is my concern, and looking at the data and some of the responses, you may say, well, yes, those are my same concerns, and see some of the responses and some of the solutions there. But it also, the report provides an opportunity for the sponsors of the report, so AvePoint and Microsoft and others, to then go in and say, well, look, this is, maybe it's unfounded because of the new features here, or customers have this concern, here's how we address that, here's how we answer that. And so of course, it's a report, it's based on the survey, it's a bunch of data and interviews and analysis around those things to kind of show the impact of those things so that companies could read this, take action on it, go and say, yes, these are our same concerns. Oh, I see that we're in the majority, or I see that we're in the small minority around that. So, yeah.
Well, my next question was, who were you targeting? But you answered that question.
Well, again, I think to clarify too, this is SharePoint related rather than all things hybrid. It's not about OneDrive. It's not about Exchange, about any of those things, and providing data specific to that. So here's the goals of the research. This may help too. So to estimate the market size of hybrid, to see the impact today, why customers who choose to remain on-prem do so, to identify those fears, those concerns about moving to the cloud, and those technical challenges, and then outline how customers are addressing the challenges. We get a lot of partner input there, and then the security administrative implications of maintaining hybrid, which there are. So the key issues, there's the question about the future of hybrid was a big question. People were even asking, hey, is Microsoft really going to support hybrid scenarios? Then, security, cloud flexibility, the control of data, the cost of integration were the major drivers, the major areas of concern going forward. So let's talk about market size really quick, and then we can jump into the questions. So I've got about 6 or 7 slides here with some of the data points. When we went in and calculated, based on the public information, the size of the SharePoint ecosystem, which is about a $10 billion ecosystem. So that is Microsoft, that is all of the ISVs like AvePoint, you have all of the SIs or consulting companies, all the partner companies. So it's all of those things together is about a $10 billion global ecosystem. Based on the data that we've compiled, today that equates to about $3.2 billion just around hybrid environments, hybrid components. So it's pretty sizable. And with our projection, it was that with the continued growth, and so the number of, and I've got another slide here in a minute, but the number of on-prem only customers decreases over the next 3 to 5 years, I think, which is expected, and the number of purely cloud customers grows in the next 3 to 5 years. But we're projecting by 2020 that just the hybrid space alone will grow to $5.3 billion. And so if you go in and look at on the right side, it's the percentage of customers that are claiming that we are a hybrid environment. Today, it's 32%. In the next 3 to 5 years, by 2020, we're saying 46% of the slice. So you see what's happening there. I mean, maybe it's hard to see in your screen, is the light gray bar at the bottom of the circle there, which is the on-prem, shrinks down. So I think it's going to rapidly shift away, so there will be very few customers, and I can't remember maybe I have it in this slide here, but like 15 to 17% will be on-prem only in the next 3-4 years, and that the majority will either be hybrid, or as you can see, the slice of the pie gets larger of those that decide to move entirely into the cloud. And so here's a better view of that. So we were trying to, with this, and the report actually goes through and explains this graphic a little bit better, but kind of showing that current and future state. What's interesting is the size of the overall pie grows, meaning the number of net new customers into the SharePoint ecosystem continues to grow. This is interesting. I just made this point yesterday. I'm sitting here at participated in the Digital Workplace Conference here in Auckland, New Zealand, where I'm sitting this early morning call, talking about the number of net new customers on SharePoint continues to grow. So there are new customers that are still deploying on-prem. There are those that are going straight to the cloud, and it's growing much faster than those that are going straight to the cloud. But overall, I mean, SharePoint continues to grow. And I remember, both of you guys remember when 2010 was coming live. It's really where I started noticing some of the detractors out there. It's like, oh, SharePoint, yeah, it's not really going to stick around, and just the haters out there in the world just started saying that, and maybe I wasn't paying attention back when with the 2007 version, but 2010 it really kind of came to life, and here we are, more successful than ever.
To the service applications,
Exactly.
Yeah. The architecture totally changed then.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting.
There. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting points that you had just brought up in that in your monologue there. One of the interesting pieces is you had kind of asked the question as to whether or not Microsoft was committed to hybrid, and I think that's something that we definitely had heard when we had initially invested in some of our hybrid design. That began in early 2012, and as we thought about what hybrid could mean to our customers, a lot of the decisions were preceded by a discussion around migration. So migration and hybrid became a coupled discussion. So what we ended up with were a set of hybrid controls that largely facilitated a migration motion. And to that extent, we offered capabilities such as search to help you discover information across on-premises and Office 365. And we did that by virtue of federation in one direction or another, otherwise bidirectional. We also invested in business connectivity services, a means for you to connect back from SharePoint Online to line of business systems on your premises. So really, migration or hybrid itself was predicated by this idea that we wanted you to be able to bring your business to the cloud. And what changed over the last couple of years and most recently over the last several months, is we took a step back and we thought about what the next-gen hybrid migration strategy means to us in SharePoint and OneDrive. And the way that we think about it today is the idea is no longer one that's predicated with you bringing your business to the cloud, but really what we're looking at hybrid as is an opportunity to go to where our customers already are with our cloud capabilities. So the way that we think about it in a nutshell is it's not about bringing your business to the cloud, it's about bringing the cloud to your business. And some of the ways that we've facilitated that are obviously through OneDrive for Business redirection, some of the simple redirection controls via Yammer embed or Office 365 video embed, but more so in respect to capabilities such as hybrid auditing, which doesn't require you to actually move the underlying data to Office 365. You simply send your anonymous usage and audit logs to Office 365. The data remains on-prem, but you can execute the security and compliance reporting capabilities that the service provides against that content. Very similarly, Cloud Hybrid Search enables you to discover content without actually having to migrate the underlying content. So if you see, there's been a shift in philosophy to where content is no longer coupled with hybrid. Yeah, so there's no longer this coupling.
I can remember the mantra used to be all in, right? Is this kind of backtracking?
I don't think it's necessarily backtracking. I think there's a recognition that there are some challenges to looking at the cloud as a wholesale proposition. For many of our customers, they've been with us for a long time from a product perspective, which means they've accumulated vast amounts of data. In order to be successful in the cloud, you really need to think about the type of data that you want to bring there. You generally don't want to bring the entirety of your non-working set to Office 365, and there's a number of reasons, for looking at it that way. Is A, why would you take your non-working set data and then just redeliver it via Office 365, where you're paying, for that, storage utilization? It's almost like using OneDrive Consumer as a means to back up your PC. It doesn't necessarily make sense to bring that non-working set with you. The working set of data, however, can benefit from a number of different capabilities that Office 365 provides. So your non-working set resides on premises, remains in your SharePoint implementation on premises. Perhaps your highly regulated data or your highly sensitive data remains on premises, but that working set of data can exist in Office 365 and benefit from all of the capabilities that the service brings. Another way to think about it too is if you inundate the Office 365 service with non-working set data, which means data that hasn't been touched in 6 months, that data is going to become visible from day one. And why does it become visible? Because our machine learning algorithms in Office 365 are going to start touching that data. And what I mean by that is if you think about capabilities or presentation layers such as Office Delve powered by the Microsoft Graph, you're going to be exposing all of that non-working set data to the graph. So really what you want to do is you want a clean set of data because you want to optimize machine learning in Office 365. So there's one of the reasons that we thought about hybrid a little bit differently. The other thing that we recognized was we needed to simplify hybrid in order for people to want to adopt that. And one of the things that I think most people aren't familiar with today is we have a hybrid configuration wizard. You go to the Office 365 Admin Center, you go to SharePoint Admin, you scroll all the way down on the menu on the left-hand side to the bottom, and it says Configure Hybrid. From a web front-end server, you run that tool. It downloads and installs a small application on your front end. You click Next, Next, Next. After your third next, it's going to ask you what hybrid scenarios you want to implement. You select the appropriate checkboxes and you click Go.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. So you were talking about scenarios. Okay, so I'm going to jump a lot because here we could talk about this all day. But you were talking about hybrid scenarios. So in a nutshell, what are the main scenarios for hybrid? And can you talk to those points real quick?
Sure. I went ahead and moved the slides and advanced them a little bit.
Yeah, you were just talking about this right here, the app launcher, right?
Yep.
So So if you think about hybrid capabilities today, they really span what I like to refer to as, you can either call this a modern hamburger for hybrid. It almost looks like an org chart, but basically what this does is from top to bottom, it's from least from the least complex to the complex in respect to what you're attempting to achieve. So on row one, we have what I call app discovery, and that's facilitated through the app launcher, available natively in SharePoint Server 2016 or by virtue of CU in SharePoint Server 2013. And what would you use app discovery for? Well, app discovery is extremely simple because the app launcher exists in both products natively in one by virtue of CU in the other product. But what app discovery does via the app launcher is it enables your users to discover applications you subscribe to in Office 365 in addition to those that exist on premises through one unified set of controls. It's super easy to implement and doesn't actually require you to implement any complex hybrid capabilities. In fact, it's extensible to the point that you can create custom tiles. So if you do have applications like Exchange Online, and you're not using SharePoint Online, but you want to surface that through SharePoint so users can discover it natively, you can definitely do so through the app launcher. And why would you want to have unified navigation across cloud and on-prem? Well, if you think about an end users are creatures of habit. For the last 10, 15, 20 years, they've arrived in the office, they've navigated to the same exact portal, or at least the same exact URL. They probably open up Outlook as the very first thing that they do on a day-to-day basis. So really what you want to do is you want to support them as much as possible. Again, creatures of habit. You don't necessarily want to switch context. By switching context, what you're doing is you're minimizing the opportunity for adoption because the more people have to remember and navigate to another URL, the less likely they already use it because it doesn't map to what they've been doing over the course of time. So what the app launcher allows you to do is build cloud services into your global navigation. The next layer down is the applications themselves. So you have an app discovery layer which enables you to find and discover applications across both cloud and on-prem. Your app layer is actually what applications can you configure for hybrid. So you can selectively configure OneDrive for Business. A great example of use cases for selective OneDrive for Business deployments is assume you are a global pharmaceutical. You have a number of different operations. One is research and development, largely centralized in a headquarters somewhere, and then you have sales personnel who travel from hospital to hospital, from market to market. The sales personnel have an expectation that they should be able to work fluidly and independent of their PC, so effectively untethered. They like to work on mobile devices because a mobile device affords connectivity from home to office. And what I mean by that is connectivity has become so ubiquitous. When you pick up your cell phone in the morning, you're connected via wireless in your home. As soon as you extend yourself beyond your wireless range, you're connected via LTE, 4G, 5G, 3G, whatever it may be. And then as soon as you arrive at your destination, even if that's on a plane, you have Wi-Fi capability again. So if you think about it, you're connected 24/7. So if you want to enable that remote sales staff to have that 24/7 connectivity, you can enable OneDrive for Business strictly for that set of personnel, whereas your researchers and your developers producing that highly sensitive IP can use OneDrive for Business on premises. So that's selective redirection. And then you have Yammer. You can take your marketing site and you can start to embed a Yammer marketing group's conversation very simply through Yammer Embed into that marketing site. So now you have a conversational or a social layer within your on-premises site. So your content's on-prem, your conversation is presented via your on-prem site using Yammer Embed. So again, that's a way to where you're not causing your users a context switch. You're actually bringing the content to them through the capability they already use. And then you have sites. So via hybrid sites, you have an aggregate view of site membership and gestures across both on-premises and Office 365. That can be configured when you configure OneDrive for Business, so they can discover sites across OneDrive for Business. Most recently, as a matter of fact, several weeks ago for SharePoint 2013, we introduced modern group site creation flow hybrid, and effectively what that is is when a user clicks Create New Site, it redirects them to the modern group site creation flow in Office 365 and creates for them a group-connected site. If you're migrating to Office 365 or Office 365 is where you see yourself in the future, that's an easy way to start getting sites created in Office 365. We also have Office 365 Video, so you simply want to bring video to on-premises. Yeah.
I was just going to say that on the site creation process, and I know this is when we've talked about this for years, but it's one part of your organization. You know you're going to start making this transition and looking at how you're going to support hybrid is to set up that new site provisioning process so that either the net new, everything new is going to the cloud, so that you still have access to the old, but you're now working within the new environment. It's going to help speed up that transition. It's just really important to go and take that step. And so I continue to run across organizations that are creating new in two places, and it causes more difficulties there. But yeah, so as far as strategy with the different pieces, sorry, just wanted to insert that comment to be thinking about that net new site provisioning process and how to do that successfully in a hybrid environment.
Yeah, for sure. And then, moving on to the video piece is you want to bring media to on-premises. Well, there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can upload your media to a document library, and users can attempt to view the media there depending on its size and depending on the form factor of their device. So it doesn't necessarily provide the optimal experience for viewing digital media. But you can simply upload your videos to the Office 365 video portal. You can allow Office 365 Video to manage the streaming and encoding of said content, and you can simply embed that media in your Office 365 or your SharePoint on-prem pages. So let's go back to that marketing site. You want to have conversations on that marketing site where the marketers have been collaborating for the past 15 years on-prem. You don't want to context switch them because the likelihood of them adopting something new is low. Well, you bring social conversations in via Yammer embed. Perhaps you want to dress up the site with some video. You bring that in through Office 365 Video embed. And then lastly, we have Delve. So everybody says, hey, I want to use the power of Delve, but I want to use it against on-prem. Well, machine learning is not something that you can put on a DVD and ship to users or ship to our customers. So the way that we decided to do that is enable it through hybrid. And basically what that means is you can leverage the next-gen hybrid search, the cloud search service, native to 2016, available to 2013 as well. And what you can do is actually index your content on-prem, have the metadata sent to Office 365, and then that opens up the opportunity for you to discover content via Delve. It also enables you to leverage the Delve mobile app. So what you can do is set up a SharePoint 2016 environment and crawl all of your legacy SharePoint environments, submit all that metadata to Office 365, and then you have a unified search experience and the opportunity to leverage capabilities such as Delve against your on-prem data. So really what our hybrid philosophy is, and Delve's a great example of it, is when we build our on-premises product today, we think about a couple of things. A, what can we deliver natively to our customers in product, which means what capabilities in Office 365 can we bring or accrue directly to on-premises? And we did some of that with 2016. What can we put in the box or stamp on the DVD? The next question is what can we not put in the box or stamp on the DVD? And once we determine what those items are, we enable hybrid form. So a great example of which is, hey, everybody loves Delve. We can't put it on a DVD. Let's enable it through hybrid. And then lastly, there's just some capabilities that can't be delivered either on-prem or through hybrid where cloud becomes a necessity. So that brings us down finally to this last layer. So you have app discovery via the app launcher, 2016 and 2013. You have the applications themselves. You can enable those through 2013 and 2016. And then lastly, you have data discovery. So now that you have information flowing into Office 365, you need to be able to find it. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. Search, auditing, and taxonomy are the three different flavors of data discovery. So that's kind of the three layers of hybrid capabilities kind of to come to an answer to Rick's question. So basically, Rick asked a very short question, and I gave him a super long answer.
Reminds me of sitting in that office with him. Hey, Bill, What about, oh, and as soon as it came out, I realized the error of my ways. But I did have a technical question about search, which is really, really important. You and I covered cloud hybrid search in Ignite last year. And there's also a question out there that says, hey, look, is it possible to configure search so that I just show the cloud index results without crawling anything on the on-prem farm?
So coming back to that question, you want to show the cloud.
So I want to, is it possible to just show the cloud index results without crawling anything on the farm? It's a farm with sensitive information and it has to be kept internally. So I only want to show the results from traditional and hybrid search applications in the Search Center for one search result.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways that you can do that. If you just want to expose your cloud search results via your on-prem search portal, the easiest way to do that is through classic hybrid search. So basically what you're going to implement is an inbound hybrid search strategy, which effectively means is you're bringing the cloud search results to your on-premises search portal. And the way that you do that is through a separate result block. Now what that means is you're effectively federating your query. You're sending a query to two different places and getting back two sets of search results. So there's no affinity between those. So you don't have that unification of relevance. You have your cloud search results on-prem, but you're not getting the unified relevance. Now, you know, what most customers want to be able to do is there's some content on-prem that they feel would benefit from some of our cloud capabilities. There's other content on-prem that they feel like would not benefit for security compliance concerns, perhaps, from cloud capabilities. If you think about what the cloud search service is, it's nothing more than a standard enterprise search service with some additional properties that instruct the indexer to send its results to Office 365. So what does that mean? That means you can create content sources and you can crawl those via the cloud hybrid search and send that set of results specific to that content source to Office 365 and preclude any result or any content that you don't want to see in Office 365. So cloud hybrid search isn't an all or none proposition. You can configure it and tweak it in such a way, much like you can the enterprise search service, to where you don't have to expose all of your content via a hybrid search design. Coming back to that initial question, if you're simply looking to bring results from Office 365 back to on-premises, the easiest way you know, to do so, and I guess I wouldn't say the easiest way, but if you're that security conscious, is to leverage a federated query model via inbound search to where you can bring your cloud stuff back to your on-premises search portal.
Yeah, so, okay, so this will drive me to another question that I have for Christian. So, as Bill was describing classic hybrid search, it seems like this is going to be like the default state. This seems to be like it's going to be where everybody needs to be. So, in your opinion, is there going to ultimately be all in, or do you think that hybrid's going to be the default?
Well, so that, I mean, it's a difficult thing to say because one, I think that as the rate of innovation increases or continues, I should say, that you know, things that we, you know, based on the baseline today, I am making certain projections, and this report makes certain projections based on innovations we've not yet seen, will likely speed up that move towards the cloud. I mean, do I see a day when 100% of customers are doing things in the cloud? Yes. I'm just not putting an end date on that. I think looking at the next, based on what I know today, in the next decade, hybrid will be a strong component. Though I think, I mean, even the announcements in the last 6 months, you know, broadly across Microsoft and outside of Microsoft, I think will decrease the percentage of companies that are on-prem only, and that could even decrease the number of hybrid environments, pushing people to the cloud more quickly. But certainly for the next 3 to 5 years, which we really focused on for this report, I believe that hybrid will be the largest slice of the pie.
And do you think that's driven mainly by revenue?
Well, I mean, I think it is driven by the fact that, as Bill said, you have people that have been on SharePoint with SharePoint, these enterprises for a long time, and it's not just a matter of whether or not they see the benefits of being entirely over in the cloud, but it's getting the value out of the investments they've already made, that infrastructure, and that just takes time. And so I think certainly the trend that we see is that as net new customers are coming on board, they're either going straight to the cloud or straight to a hybrid solution. And as they're looking kind of future capabilities, they're looking at hybrid at the very least, because it's where the fastest innovation is happening. It's where most of that, people recognize that's where it's going. How do we take advantage of that? So the size of those that are all cloud is increasing rapidly, but I think that in 10 years, maybe I'll make this safe prediction, but in 10 years, I don't think there will be more than 2-3% purely on-prem, and anybody else that has any footprint on-prem, it'll be a hybrid solution.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so a little bit of a technical question for Bill. What about those clients who use federation services with their partners and they're all on-prem? How is hybrid going to help them?
Yeah, I think one of the probably the best aspects of hybrid. And sorry, I'm actually trying to answer some questions at the same time that I do this that are coming through the queue. So for those of you that are asking questions, I am trying to get to them, and hopefully the tool is actually working and it's sending. So in respect to federation services, one of the great benefits of Office 365 and a hybrid design is really this ability for you to share externally. So for many organizations over the course of SharePoint's history, one of the ways that many would share externally is through an extranet model. Now, from a SharePoint perspective, if the only content that you anticipate sharing externally is stored via SharePoint, then an extranet could be, an expensive proposition just to facilitate sharing a document with a partner, because you're implementing an extranet, you're punching holes in your firewall, and you're doing that in a number of different ways. You're doing that via ADFS, or you're doing that through a resource forest, or you're doing that by provisioning partners in your corporate identity provider. In any given case, it's a relatively complex scenario for a simple problem, which is I want to share a document with Joe, who works at Tailspin Toys, and here we are at Contoso, and how do I do that? Well, one of the easiest ways to do that is you do that through Office 365, and you use our B2B collaboration model, effectively our extranet model, which means you stand up B2B collaboration in Office 365. Joe at Contoso or Jane at Contoso can simply authenticate using their set of credentials via same or single sign-on, depending on how you've implemented AAD. And then once you actually move beyond that, the next step of the strategy itself is configuring the controls that we have that will, help you from a security perspective. So basically what you're standing up is a site collection in Office 365 dedicated to external sharing. The benefit of that is our sharing controls allow you to limit or allow or deny sharing based on IP addresses or a range of IP addresses. We allow you to perform those same actions based on domain. So you can allow external collaboration with Tailspin Toys. You can disallow with, say, Fabricam. Some of the other ways that you can do it is we also support URL detonation. So you can time bomb your links to share for only a limited amount of time. You can also revoke shares. So there's a number of different ways that you can accommodate that B2B external sharing, that are far more inexpensive.
It sounds a lot more straightforward than the old ADFS. I mean, when you wanted to federate with another company or a partner, I mean, you had to swap certs. You had to make sure that your ADFS service could connect. I mean, it was rough. It was really, really rough. So what would you say the 2 or 3 major differences between on-prem ADFS and AD Connect are?
Yeah, I would say that the easiest way to answer that is with Azure AD Connect. It's pretty simple. So by pretty simple is you download Azure AD Connect, you run it on a DC, you click next 3 times. At one of those clicks, you enter your administrative credentials for your on-prem identity provider, and then the next click, you enter your tenant administrator credentials. And basically from there, the sync process just does its thing and brings username and password hash to Azure AD. So now you have the same set of credentials that your users would use on premises available to the cloud services. So, you know, the simple way to think about it, or the simpleton's answer to your question is ADFS versus something like Azure AD Connect. Azure AD Connect doesn't require any kind of configuration of your on-premises identity provider or any kind of reconfiguration. It's basically plug and play. You move and you go.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so we're going to, we've got about 10 more minutes. So I'd like to open up the forum here for some questions that we've got that we haven't quite answered.
Yeah, we've got a few that have stacked up there. Yeah.
I could see that, I wasn't looking at it, but you guys were, and it's like, wow. Okay, one of the questions.
Could try to answer. Yep.
Yeah, we could try to. What are the authentication scenarios? SharePoint teams eager to move to the cloud. Domain admins, I'm going to assume those are the on-prem guys, are not. They see benefits, but more administrative overhead for them in the authentication scenario. I would say there would be less overhead in the authentication scenario. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, so go back to the original question.
The question is, what are the authentication scenarios? They've got, half of them, the SharePoint team wants to move to the cloud, but the on-prem guys are like, no. They see benefits for us, but more administrative overhead for them. And I'm going to assume that's the domain admins. And I'm going to say it's the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, there's really from an identity perspective, there's basically 3 flavors of identity that will, or 3 flavors of implementation that will bring you to Office 365 or enable your users to perform auth-z-authn actions. So basically, step 1. There's a concept called cloud identity. Everybody's probably familiar with that. That's used Office 365, absent any kind of identity federation or replication. And basically what that is that is the credential that is jdo at contoso.onmicrosoft.com. That is an identity. That's basically what we call cloud identity. Cloud identity has no affinity to your on-premises identity infrastructure. It is a discrete identity that you create in the cloud. So in Office 365, you can create discrete identities that have no affinity to on-premises. That model is great if you want the utmost of simplicity, but the most complexity from a user perspective, because now you're providing them with a separate set of credentials to authenticate against cloud services. Something you definitely don't want to do if you already have a mature on-premises infrastructure. So that leaves you with 2 possibilities from an identity perspective: same sign-on or single sign-on. The difference between same and single sign-on: Azure AD Connect, same sign-on. Basically, that allows users to use the same set of credentials that they use on-premises in Office 365 services, with the exception of that they have to re-authenticate when arriving at Office 365 from on-prem. So if they click the OneDrive for Business tile and they're configured for redirection, they would have to authenticate to Office 365 using their same set of on-prem credentials, because the password hash and username have been replicated to Azure AD. Same sign-on, correct. Azure AD Connect. Single sign-on, right, which actually, conversely,
single sign-on is
that's
different.
Your SSO model. So your SSO model is effectively you're passing the credentials to Office 365. It doesn't require any overhead from a user perspective. But from a management perspective, nothing changes, and that's the easy way to think about it. You're still mastering identity on premises, and you are still controlling identity on premises. You're simply replicating identity to Office 365. So, it doesn't necessarily add overhead. What adds overhead is if you're looking at pure cloud identity models, which is, highly not recommended for, any kind of hybrid design, or really if you're already on premises. Now, if you're pure cloud and you don't have a mature identity strategy on premises, so you're a small business, you're not using Open Directory, you're not using Active Directory, you're basically just using local machine accounts, for your 5 to 10 users, great, use cloud identity.
Yeah. So that actually answers another question which was in the queue that said if you've already deployed AD Connect, right, to integrate with Azure, O365, and Active Directory, do you still need to do anything additional for SharePoint on-prem? See, once you've done all the work up there, you're good to go. Would you concur with that, Bill?
Yeah, I could definitely say yes to that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to answer a quick question real quick from, I was trying to type it in, but it kept disappearing on me, from Kirk. This is related to multiple on-prem farms to a single tenant, but really what the question is about is OneDrive for Business, and they don't need an on-prem MySite. So basically what happens is when you configure OneDrive for Business redirection, if the user themselves have an existing MySite on premises and you've opted to redirect them to Office 365, that redirection doesn't migrate their existing on-premises MySite to Office 365. That actually remains, and it remains accessible, but only by its direct URL. So when they click on the OneDrive for Business icon on the app launcher, they're redirected to Office 365, where their new site is provisioned, and that's where they'll begin to upload content and manipulate their profile. Their existing MySite, as had existed on premises, will continue to exist unless you opt to delete it manually. If you allow it to continue to exist, the user won't be able to get to it unless they've bookmarked its absolute URL, and then they'll be able to get to it still. So I just wanted to answer that one real quick because I was struggling trying to type in the answer in the tool here.
Right. Yeah, I totally understand that. Okay, so right now, there was another question. How does AD Connect replace ADFS?
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to the original.
Yeah,
that comes back to the original answer that we just had. It's not a replacement for ADFS. It's a prerequisite for ADFS if you think about it that way. So whether you're opting to do same or single sign-on, you're going to have the base prerequisite of Azure AD because Azure AD is going to provide authentication and authorization services for content across Microsoft's cloud services. So think of Azure AD Connect as a prerequisite to whatever identity model you opt to implement. And that's anywhere from cloud identity all the way up to ADFS. You're going to be leveraging Azure AD for cloud services delivered by Microsoft, which means you have to get the identity there to the cloud service in one way or another. The only thing that's really changes is if you're purely using Azure AD Connect and you're doing same sign-on. If you're using SSO, you're still using Azure AD Connect, but you're passing the credentials seamlessly to Office 365, so you're mitigating the need to re-authenticate.
Okay. One last question here from Mark. What are the biggest mistakes companies make when implementing a hybrid SharePoint search solution? Well, that's interesting because I'm going to talk about that at the European Collaboration Summit. Not just about hybrid search, but about a lot of coming to terms with preparation. Just as the saying says, a pound of prevention, an ounce of prevention prevents a pound of pain. So I will be talking a lot about that. So I would probably say the biggest mistake that companies make when doing anything is pretty much all the same, whatever it is that they're doing, whether they're implementing hybrid search, whether they're deploying applications, it doesn't matter. The number one mistake I think companies make when implementing a technology is failing to plan. Having a plan in place, knowing what's going to, or what they expect to happen, what are the desired results, who's the one throat to choke, so to speak. If you come to terms and understand planning and saying, hey, this is what we need to do, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it, you'll probably be successful. If the question is more, which of the technical steps do I have to do where people make a mistake, well, I don't think there's an answer for that. I think it's different for each company. But I think the biggest mistake that companies make is, they make a decision that they're going to carry out a particular implementation, and they didn't do successful planning. I think that's the answer to that.
Yeah, and I would say one of the biggest mistakes from a hybrid search perspective as well, Rick, is what I talked about in the very beginning, which is attempting to use the cloud as a placeholder for all of your content. Because again, hybrid search or search in general inside of Office 365, again, benefits from our investments in intelligence and insights. So really what you want to do is maximize the potential of your data in Office 365, which means from a search perspective, you will not only want to bring the right data, which means the working set of data, but you want to bring data that is enriched with taxonomy, because you want to leverage the most of what insights and intelligence can offer your users. So you want to make sure that you're bringing not only the working set of data but enriched data as well. So you want to make sure that it's polished data with a great set of classification and taxonomy behind it. I just want to come kind of to the last one.
And that's all planning. You have to do all that all up front. Yep.
So there was a great question from Gary here, which was one of the challenges that users face is a shift in URLs when you're moving to Office 365, because you're coming from a long implemented on-premises infrastructure where people are very familiar with the URLs that they need to access on a day-to-day basis, HTTP, Contoso, or whatever it may be. And now you're pulling a URL switch when you're moving users to Office 365. Here at Microsoft, we implement hybrid ourselves, MSIT does. And the way that we accommodated the transition is we used a lot of vanity URLs and a lot of redirection. So basically we built our own redirection logic to accommodate that. So we used to have a on-premises environment that we called HTTP SharePoint. And everything was HTTP SharePoint /sites/ whatever site the user created. And now we're SharePoint or Microsoft.SharePoint.com. And the way that we facilitated that is through a model of building a redirect solution. So for basically each on-prem site, we had its equivalent cloud URL stored in a SQL table. And then we built some redirect logic, so when people visited the on-prem site, we basically had an HTTP module, effectively, that would look up that requested URL in the database and then send them to the new URL in Office 365. Wow. It's
is that how you guys are still getting around wins, or have you guys totally gotten rid of wins, and that's what you're doing now?
Yeah, so and that was that. Today we don't need that anymore, because we've effectively completed that migration. But this had been years ago when we had started our hybrid design and moving stuff to the cloud. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that, but there's really at the end of the day, outside of user education, there's no foolproof way to mask it in such a way to where it's going to address every user's challenges. So I just wanted to kind of get to that one. It's one of those to where there's really no simple answer to the question itself. Is because you could create a table with existing and new URL. You could do an HTTP module. You could redirect users on that, but it becomes operational expenditure because you have to keep it up to date.
You have to keep it up. It's manually.
We did it for a sufficient enough time to ensure that users were bookmarking the URL. You could also throw a splash page in front of the old URL, so you could add some additional logic to it, which states, hey, your new URL is going to be foo. Click here to bookmark now. You'll be redirected in X number of seconds. So you could definitely throw some redirection logic in front of it. But at the end of the day, user education is about the best way to go and the most foolproof way to go, because technology isn't going to solve user habits.
Nope, it will not. I appreciate your time. We are out of time. Actually, we're a little bit over, but I wanted to thank Christian Buckley and Bill Baer for joining us here at AvePoint for this webinar. Please, everyone, if you would not mind going to our website, www.avepoint.com/hybrid-study. You can go and get a copy of Christian Buckley's hybrid report. It's fantastic. As he stated earlier in the webinar, it will help you understand what everybody else in the industry is thinking and where they're going for hybrid, and giving some insights to that. Again, I'd like to thank him, and I'd like to thank Bill for his technical insights, and hopefully we can get this going again. And I'd like to give you back your afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Rick.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rick. And for those of you that want to learn more, you can visit hybrid.office.com. You can also find me on Twitter at William Baer. If you do so, for any questions that I wasn't able to answer here, or you felt like didn't get the answer that you were looking for, feel free to ping me on Twitter. I can follow you back. I'll send you my email via direct message, and we can continue the conversation and make sure that you get the answer you were looking for out of today's webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you.